friends, welcome and welcome back to Lit by Iris. So when I was putting together my top 10 books of 2024, I noticed something kind of funny. I kept using words like unsettling, dark, and haunting over and over again to describe some of the books in my favorite list. And while making that video, I have been thinking, why not just make a list of books that fit that vibe? Now, I'm not talking about straight up horror or super graphic stuff. I mean, sure, those can be disturbing, but that's not really what I'm going for here. I'm thinking more about books that leave you feeling uncomfortable. I think uncomfortable discomfort is a word I'm looking at. Like they creep under your skin in a more subtle way. You know, the kind of the books that make you go like, what did I just read? But in the best way possible. To give you an idea of what I mean, think of books that I have already included in my favorite 2024 reads in my last video, like The Vegetarian by Hank Kahn, The Lottery and the Other Stories by Shirley Jackson, or I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. They're not flat out horror, but they are definitely not cozy reads. And they're literally very atmospheric and just weird in the most fascinating way. So today I'm sharing my list of books that fit this vibe. Some are dark, some are disturbing, and some are just this quietly unsettling. Let's dive in. Okay, first up is Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata. If you have watched my video on my 2024 favorite books, you know I included Convenience Store Women, and honestly, I'm kind of obsessed with Murata's writing. I have read 3 of her books by now, and what blows me away is how different they all are. She has this incredible ability to take the mundane and twist it into something completely bizarre yet weirdly relatable. So Life Ceremony is a collection of short stories, and let me tell you, they are wild. For example, the title story, Life Ceremony, is the one where eating human flesh is a sacred ritual. And it's about a society where after someone dies, their loved ones gather to eat their body as a way to honor them. Sounds horrifying, right? But Murata writes in such a calm, matter-of-fact way that make you question why we find it so disturbing in the first place. Like, why do we bury or cremate people? Who decided what was the normal way to do things? And in another story named A First-Rate Material, it's her first story in this book where human body parts are used to make clothing and furniture, a sweater made of human hair or a chair made of bones. It's grotesque, but also weirdly beautiful in how it challenges our ideas of value and utility. What I love about Murata is how she takes these outrageous concepts and makes them feel normal. She doesn't judge or sensationalize. She just presents them in this calm, almost detached way that forces you to confront your own biases. It's mind-blowing how she comes up with these ideas, and even more mind-blowing how she makes them feel so real. If you have read Convenience Store Women or Earthlings, you know what I mean. All her books are so different, but they all have this undercurrent of questioning society norms and exploring what it means to be normal. And honestly, I think that's why I keep coming back to her work. It's unsettling, but in a way that feels important. Like, it's not just weird for the sake of being weird. It's weird to make you think. Speaking of Murata, let's talk about Earthlings, The Black Sheet in the House. I don't have the physical copy. I read the Earthlings with my Kindle. This book is a lot. And honestly, it's the reason I wanted to make this list in the first place. When I was making the previous video, I hesitated to include the Earthlings because, well, it's really disturbing. So I went with convenience store women instead, which is still amazing, but let's be real, it's way more palatable. Here in this list, I can finally yap about Earthlings without holding back. And trust me, this book deserves its own space because it is that messed up. I'd heard so many people talk about how disturbing it was, but I went into thinking, okay, how bad can it really be? I mean, I have read my fair share of dark books, so I thought maybe people were overhyping it. Spoiler, they were not. Basically, Earthlings follows this girl, Natsuki, a young girl who believes she's an alien sent to Earth. As a child, she's already dealing with trauma and a sense of alienation from her family and society. But as she grows older, her detachment from the world spirals into something truly horrifying. I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say this book goes to places I never could have imagined. What makes it so disturbing isn't just the events themselves, it's how Murata frames them. She doesn't sensationalize or traumatize, she just lays everything out there. It's this weirdly detached, almost clinical tone that makes the story hit even harder. You are reading these surreal, grotesque moments, and you're like, wait, why isn't the narrator freaking out right now? But that's the thing, Murata doesn't give you the emotional cues you are used to. She leaves you to sit with the discomfort, and it's just that unsettling. I also think what got me the most was how the book explores the pressure to conform to societal expectations. This is something she touched in both of her other books a lot. Here, Natsuki refuses to fit into the mold of what's normal, leads her down this dark, twisted path, and it's both tragic and horrifying to watch. It's a book that makes you question how far someone can go to reject the world around them and how far society will go to force them to comply. So yeah, Earthling is the book that made me want to make this list. It's one I couldn't stop thinking about, even though it made me deeply uncomfortable. And honestly, that's why I love Murata's writing so much. She doesn't shy away from the weird, the dark, or disturbing. She just dives right in, forces you to confront things you rather not to think about. And next we have Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. This book is an experience. It's very short, like really short, but don't let that fool you. It packs a punch. The story is about this woman named Amanda on her deathbed. Seems like having a conversation with this young boy, and together they unravel the events that led to her condition. Very creepy, it's intense, and it's one of those books that just sticks with you. The way she writes is so sharp and precise. Every sentence feels intentional, and the scenes just play out in your head like a movie. It's almost like you're watching a thriller, but in a book form. And I strongly suggest to read this in one setting if you can. There are no chapters, no breaks, just this fragmented narrative that pulls you in and doesn't let go. I actually read this book in a bookshop over 2 different trips because I couldn't put it down. And even though I finished there, I still bought my own copy because I knew I'd want to revisit it. What makes Fever Dream so unsettling isn't just the story itself, it's the atmosphere. It feels like you're trapped in a nightmare, but not the kind with jump scares or monsters. It's more like this slow creeping sense of dread that just builds and builds. You're constantly on edge trying to piece together what's happening, and by the time you finish, you're left with this lingering feeling of unease. If you're looking for a book that's short but impactful, this is it. And honestly, after reading this, I'm down to read anything Schweblin writes. She's that good. And next, I want to talk about Dump House by John Burnside. which I don't see people mention this book much here at all. This book is very intense comparatively in this list. It's about a man who becomes obsessed with recreating an 18th century experiment to raise children without language. It's as disturbing as it sounds, but what really stands out to me is Burnside's writing. It's so atmospheric and haunting. It almost feels like you're walking through a fog the entire time you're reading it. The way Burnside describes the setting and the protagonist's state of mind is just chilling. It's not just about what's happening in the story, it's about how it feels. You're not just watching this guy's mind unravel, you're right there with him, feeling the weight of his obsession and the moral question it raises. Burnside doesn't spell everything out for you either. He leaves a lot of space for you to fill in the gaps, which makes the whole experience even more unsettling. It's not a book with a lot of action or gory, but a little bit gory for sure, but it's deeply disturbing in its own way. I don't think this book is for everyone, like any of the books in this list, but this one is particularly about this slow creeping realization that something is very, very wrong. And the way Burnside captures that through his writing is just masterful. If you're into books that are more about atmosphere and psychological tension than plot twists, this one is for you. Now let's lighten things up a little. Just kidding, this one is still pretty dark. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. This is a part mystery and part philosophical exploration, but I do think this one has its own dark humor, relatively light-hearted some sort. It's about this eccentric older woman living in a remote Polish village who gets caught up in a series of mysterious deaths. What I love about this book is how it balances dark humor with genuinely unsettling themes. The protagonist's worldview is fascinating but also kind of disturbing, and the way the story unfolds keep you guessing. I don't think I got the twist until the very end. It's a book that makes you think, but it also creeps you under the skin in the best way. And I also want to add one of Murakami's book here. I made a video of what to start with Murakami's books, I think 2 years ago. I didn't really emphasize the dark or unsettling side of his contents, but I do think if you ever read Murakami before, you know his stuff is always a little weird. Dance 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 is about an unnamed protagonist searching for a missing woman. And it's full of surreal encounters and dreamlike scenarios. What really gets me about Dance 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 is the loneliness. The protagonist is surrounded by people, but he is still so isolated, and that sense of existential dread just lingers throughout the whole book. It's not in your face unsettling, it's way more subtle than any of the other books here, but it's like a quiet hum in the background that you cannot ignore. If you're into books that mess with your head in a quiet, understated way, this one is for you. It's not about big twists or shocking moments. It's about the atmosphere, the mood, and the lingering feeling of unease that stays with you long after you put this book down. Lastly, we have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. The premise is about a team of scientists enter a mysterious uninhabited area called Area X, where the rules of nature don't seem to apply. Plants grow in impossible ways, animals are muted, and there's this eerie presence that no one can quite explain. What makes this book unsettling is how it blends science fiction with horror. It's not your typical space opera kind of science fiction. It's more like a slow descent into the unknown story. The scientists are trying to make sense of what's happening in Area X, but the more they discover, the less they understand. It's very creepy. In a way, it reminds me of Our Wives Under the Sea because both books have this premise where the protagonist's spouse went to an expedition and things went wrong. They're about exploring the unknown, but instead of feeling exciting or adventurous, it feels wrong. Like you're trespassing on something you weren't meant to see. The creepiness in Annihilation comes from the ambiguity. You are never quite sure what's real, what's a hallucination, or what's even human anymore. It's the kind of book that leaves you with more questions than answers. If you don't like books not giving answers in the end, this book isn't for you. But if you love the books like Our Wives Under the Sea, this is a must read. Those are my picks for the unsettling, dark, and haunting books. Whether you're into literary fictions or genre fictions or just something that makes you feel, what did I just read? I think there's something here for everyone. Let me know in the comments section if you have read any of these or if you have recommendations for other weird dark books that I should check out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.